Welcome back to another tabletop review. Today we'll be taking a look at the Polish Radom P64 pistol chambered for the 9x18 9mm Makarov. If you've watched many of my videos, you know that I do a bit of collecting. And my favorite collectibles are the old mouse or vest pocket pistols, as well as Cold War era Walther PP or PPK clones. When I go to a gun show, I'll usually scan for these items first. That's why I found this Polish-made 1972 Radom P64 9mm Makarov pistol just a few months ago. It looked very clean and fresh for a 50-year-old gun, and with the owner's permission, I checked the gun's function. At first I thought something was broken because the double action didn't seem to work. The owner showed me it did work. I just wasn't pulling the trigger hard enough. My first thought was, wow, not only is the pull hard, it stacks at the end of the pull outrageously hard. We eventually agreed on a price that left me with plenty of room for replacing springs and to add additional magazine, etc. Here's the Walther PPK for comparison, and as you can see, the P64 looks very similar, and the takedown procedures are identical. But back in the day, the P64 designers swore the design was all their own. Like the PPK, the P64 is an all-steel, double-action, single-action, blowback, semi-automatic. Even internally, the P64 shares its basic features with the PPK. Now before we go any further, let's make sure this gun is cleared first. And by the way, if you enjoy this review, be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Produced between 1965 and 1983, the Polish-made P64 was adopted in 1965 by the Polish Army, Police, and Security Forces. The P64s were produced at Factory 11, as it says here. Today known as Fabryka Broni Lucznik in Radom, Poland during the Cold War era, this one was plainly produced in 1972. And since the second generation P64s had a triangular shaped hammer and came out after 1972, this pistol would have been one of the final first generation P64s produced. I'm told the differences are mostly internal. The magazines for the second generation P64s will not work in the first generation pistols. As a communist block pistol intended for military and law enforcement use, it was chambered in the Cold War favorite handgun cartridge, the 9x18 Makarov, compared to the 9mm Parabellum and the 380 ACP cartridges. The 9x18 9mm Makarov is in between in size. The P64 is also fairly well supported with many parts readily available. Typically offered at half or less the price of a Walther PPK, the P64 has been a popular surplus trade-in European pistol. This one was imported by TG, or Tennessee Guns, of Knox, Tennessee, probably in the 1990s. Back about 10 years ago, you could probably have picked up one of these for less than $200. 20 years ago, maybe for about $100. As you may already know, back in the day, the Walther PP and PPK were highly regarded and became the target of replication by many countries. So the Polish P64 wasn't the only clone of the Walther PPK. Hungary had its PA-63, Soviet Union had its Makarov, Czechoslovakia had its CZ-50, and Spain had its Astra Constable, to name a few. Since the P64 is a clone of the PPK, let's just take a quick look at the similarities and differences. This is actually a PPK-S, but close enough. Outside dimensions and features are almost identical. As for differences, chambering of the P64 and the 9x18 9mm Makarov is an obvious difference. The PPK was available in 22, 32, and 380. The magazine release on the P64 is the European heel type, whereas the PPK has a button release on the left side. Otherwise, the two guns are quite similar. There's no doubt that the P64 is not as refined as the PPK, but while the fit and finish may not be equal to the PPK's, the P64 is still an attractive, functional, and economical PPK alternative. In addition to the P64 and PPK sharing virtually identical dimensions and features, both are blowback action guns with barrels fixed to the receiver while functioning as a guide rod for the recoil spring. Both use a single stack magazine, feature an exposed hammer, and double single action trigger that is decocked by rolling down the safety lever. The P64's field strips the same as the PPK. And there's no slide catch, and releasing the slide requires ejecting the empty magazine and pulling back on the slide. Both are equipped with small, snag-free sights. The 9x18 9mm Makarov round is a product of the Cold War. It was developed specifically to be distinct from the NATO ammunition, so the Warsaw Pact ammo could not be used by NATO forces against them. So basically the difference in the case size of the 9x18 Makarov was intentionally smaller than the traditional 9x19 9mm Parabellum. The Makarov cartridge may not have the power of the popular 9mm Luger round, but many consider it more controllable than the 9mm Luger round and to be a viable self-defense cartridge for concealed carry handguns today. I can find target and range Makarov rounds at online outlets for about 60 cents each, and even Hornady self-defense rounds for about 70 cents each. That's not bad. As for movie connections, like the Soviet Makarov and Hungarian-made PA-63, the Polish P-64 is a popular, well-known Cold War firearm. However, there aren't a lot of films featuring the P-64. There's at least one I'm familiar with, the 1988 action thriller Red Heat, that stars Arnold Schwarzenegger as Ivan Danko, a Soviet police officer from Moscow, and James Belushi as Chicago PD detective Art Ridznik. I'm told that the P-64s typically came to importers individually wrapped in anti-rust paper with one magazine and nothing else. Importers might provide a box, but because the P-64 was basically an import military surplus gun, I wouldn't expect it. I have seen some in cardboard boxes as well as a few plastic or wood cases, but I assume that was dependent on the importer or the previous owner. As for specifications, the P-64 is chambered in the 9x18 9mm Makarov cartridge. As a PPK clone, it's a double action blowback with the fixed barrel into the receiver. Sights are anti-snag, small black with machined in front and small and steel dovetailed rear. Slide serrations on the rear of the slide are moderate in definition. There's checkering on the top of the slide to reduce glare. There's no slide release. The safety decocker is here, up for fire. Putting the safety on will decock the pistol. The safety decocker is a little stiff and it's not ambidextrous. The hammer is small and exposed. Double action trigger pull is significant at nearly 24 pounds. Single action trigger pull is about 3.5 pounds. Trigger reset is long, about 1/2 inch, but crisp. Grip panels are black plastic with good stippling. The magazine release is located here, slightly indented into the heel. Magazines are single stack 6-round capacity with a plastic pinky extension. This P-64 came with 2 magazines. Typically they come with only one. One of these magazines has the gun matching serial number etched on it. Extra magazines are still available for about $50. As I mentioned earlier, newer magazines will not work in the first generation P-64s. Breakdown is accomplished by pulling down on the trigger guard just like the PPK. The barrel is 3.3 inches. Overall length is 6.3 inches. Height is 4.6 inches. Thickness is about 1 inch. Unloaded weight, 22 ounces. As for function, the P-64's long 24-pound heavy double action first trigger pull requires getting used to. I believe it's the heaviest trigger I've ever experienced, and I thought the Walther PPK S22 was heavy at 18 pounds. I've been told that this heavy pull was on purpose, requested by the Polish military for safety purposes. Also, the trigger stacks at the end of the pull, requiring a good amount of pressure. Racking the slide on the P-64 is also quite heavy. The slide serrations don't help much, they're a little too thin. Cocking the hammer first makes it a little bit lighter to fully rack, but the single action trigger is actually very good. Then there's the recoil from the P64. It's just plain brutal. The thin grips don't help. And while the finish is okay, I'd say the build quality is only fair. These guns were not produced for their looks, but rather they were mass produced to be functional. The visible light machining marks throughout obviously set the P64 below Walther PPK standards. The 6-round magazines are a little stiff to load. My Magnula auto loader works just fine with Makarov rounds. The magazine has a good firm click when inserted. Nice pinky extension, which crowds my fingers a little, but I need that extension with my large hands. At 22 ounces, this P64 feels a little heavy for its size. Safety decocker seems to be a little stiff to operate, but can be easily pushed forward off safe. These black sights are a little too small for my liking. A little dab of white on the front sight would probably help. The gun's feel in my hand is okay, but small. I think it's the grips. The grips feel a little cheap. A whole grip sleeve might help. The magazine pinky extension has some sharp edges that might leave some abrasion. Light sanding should solve that issue. Now note that the rear of the slide has been rounded a little to avoid slide biting. That's kind of interesting. The beaver tail is more moderate than on the PPK. I'm glad to see that pointing seems natural. The kickback is a straight back harsh punch, but there's minimal muzzle rise. Although uncomfortable, the gun is very controllable. Accuracy was excellent at 24 and 35 feet, as it should be with its fixed barrel blowback design. Here we are at the range with my P64. Targets are set at 25 feet, and I've got the new 18-pound hammer spring installed. Much better double action trigger pull. We're trying out different recoil springs, starting with the factory 18-pound spring. Yeah, the recoil is really harsh. Let's try the 22-pound spring. It should provide the most relief. To be honest, I could tell only a slight improvement. Still quite harsh. Let's try the 20-pound spring at 35 feet. Again, hard to tell much difference in felt recoil. Staying at 35 feet, still with the 20-pound spring. Still a pretty brutal kick. You know, these thin grips don't help. I really think a whole grip sleeve might make a huge difference here. As for cons, to be honest, I expected the P64 to be similar to my Hungarian-built PA63, which is also chambered for the 9x18 Makarov rounds. But since the P64 has a steel frame compared to the PA63's aluminum frame, I'd actually hoped the P64 might end up being just a little bit better. But that was not the case. The P64's action is noticeably heavier, so if you have weak hands, this is definitely not the gun for you. And shooting comfort is also quite harsh and unpleasant. Slide bites are a common complaint. And note that the Polish P64, if carried with a round in the chamber, hammer down, and the safety decocker off, as in double action ready position, could accidentally fire because the firing pin is unlocked. As such, I wouldn't recommend it for carry without the safety on, or for pocket carry, or to be carried without a holster at all. If you do carry it, you'll need a fair amount of practice with this unusual trigger, even with spring upgrades. In my opinion, the Polish P64 has about the same level of craftsmanship as the Hungarian PA63, but on overall looks and handling, the PA63, perhaps because it's a little bit of a larger gun, seems better. And obviously the P64 is certainly no match for the more refined Walther PPK. But what is a little ironic to me is that the current use value of the Polish Radom P64, according to Genetron.com's, is more than twice that of the Hungarian FEG PA63. And from a practical assessment at 22 ounces, this is also a fairly heavy gun. So if your plan is to carry it for defense, the heavy double action trigger pull and subsequent light single action pull will take some practice to perfect control and accuracy. Also, like the PPK, the P64 suffers from low capacity and small sights. Another con of the P64 is it being chambered for the 9x18 9mm Makarov. The compact size and narrow grips of the P64 would inevitably lead to an uncomfortable shooting experience using the 9x18 Makarov rounds. And although I can find Makarov rounds online priced reasonably, it's a nuisance compared to the easy local availability and affordability of 9mm Luger and even 380 ACP rounds that I can pick up simply anywhere today. This leads me to wonder what this gun would be like chambered for the 380 rounds. Finally, one must consider that the P64 is no longer in production and hasn't been for decades. It's a given that as these pistols age, replacement parts are likely to become more difficult to find. Although that doesn't appear to be a big problem at this time, it could be in the future. As for pros, the attraction for me to this Polish clone of the PPK was indeed its similarity to the German classic PPK. In size and proportions, the P64 is a really good match, and although I was pretty rough on my listing of cons, the P64 is still an accurate, functional, sturdy, fun little pistol. It was built to military standards, which means it's likely to be reliable, dependable, and accurate. Maintenance is easy, and remember, it's a double action, single action pistol with a safety decocker. As for the trigger pull and recoil complaints, well, Wolff Gun Springs offer very affordable assorted spring packs for you to tune your P64 more to your liking. My experience with changing out the springs did demonstrate improvements. And all other issues aside, from what I've seen, you can probably pick up a used P64 today for as little as $175 to $350 depending on conditions. Even at the high end, that's still half of what you'd pay for a used Walther PPK. I'd predict the long-term value of the P64 to be good as well. It remains highly sought after, and I would expect it should increase in value as time goes by. Disassembly is exactly like that for the PPK. We make sure that the gun is empty first. Take the safety off, cock the hammer, and pull down on the trigger guard and lock it off to the side. Pull back on the slide and lift up, then remove forward and off the gun. Recoil spring can be removed from the barrel for cleaning. Pretty much that's it. Now let's take a brief moment to look at the replacement springs available from Wolff Gun Springs for the P64. Here are the hammer springs, the recoil springs, firing pin springs, and even a magazine spring. I went ahead and got all of these while they were available. You never know. And this whole lot was about $40 including shipping. By the way, I have found it's best to mark the springs when I open the packs to identify their strengths. Trust me on this. It makes it easier to remember which was which later. While I've got this gun disassembled, I might as well show you how to change out the recoil and trigger springs. I'm replacing the factory 18-pound recoil spring here with a 22-pound spring from Wolff Gun Springs to see if it lightens the felt recoil and makes the gun more comfortable to shoot. I'll try the 20-pound spring later. Replacing the recoil springs is easy. Basically, you're just choosing a spring and putting it on the barrel like this. The tight end goes on first. The hammer spring is located under the grips. Unscrew the small grip retaining bolt. Press the grips off through the magazine well. Once the grips are removed, locate the little hole at the bottom of the hammer strut just below the spring. Push a small paper clip or wire through the hole. Release the hammer slowly. Now the hammer strut pin can be easily pressed out and removed. This will free the hammer strut for removal. Now press down on the hammer spring so the paper clip can be freed and the old spring removed. Exchanged with a new spring. I'm using an 18-pound spring, although many prefer the even lighter 17-pound spring from Wolff. Compress the new spring onto the strut and return the paper clip to capture the spring. I find a vise helpful to hold the end of the strut here while compressing the spring. Return the hammer strut to the gun and replace the strut pin. Cock the hammer and remove the paper clip. The new hammer spring is now installed. Return the grips and reassemble the gun. Reassembly from field strip is easy. If removed, return the recoil spring. Smaller end goes first. Make sure that you have the trigger guard open. Make sure that the hammer is back. Return the slide to the frame. Release the trigger guard. Return the hammer. That's for function. That's it. According to Genetron.com, the used price of a P64 is currently about $425, and True Gun Value suggests a manufacturer's suggested retail price today of $430 and $385 for a used P64. Trade-in value is about $250. So if you come across a nice one for $250 to $350, actually that's probably a good price in my opinion. Now before we end today's video, I'd like to remind you that if you haven't already, be sure to like, share, and subscribe down below. And thanks for watching. In summary, the P64 is the Polish Cold War clone answer to the PPK. If you like the looks of the PPK, you'll probably like the P64, but be aware that the build quality is not quite on the same level. The P64 seems more functional, which is okay. Its Makarov ammo may pose a challenge and will be most certainly more expensive. Ergonomics are okay, and fortunately the P64's heavy double action trigger pull can be greatly improved through spring replacements. In my opinion, the P64 is what it is, which is indeed a sturdy and more affordable good alternative to the PPK. As a PPK clone, the size and the dimensions of the Radom P64, as well as its fixed barrel design, double single action trigger, safety decocker, and takedown procedures are very similar. If you're a fan of the PPK, you may want to take a look at the P64, especially as a low-cost alternative. The P64 has excellent accuracy and a good single action trigger, but to be realistic, it falls short in fit and finish as well as function in my opinion compared to the PPK. It is what you might expect to have been mass produced by a Soviet bloc country back in the day. That being said, I still like this little gun for what it is. How much do I like it? Actually, I like it a lot until I'm firing it. I can't say the P64 is a great gun, but it's a good one, and with the new springs, the function and feel are greatly improved. I can see how the P64, carried properly, could serve as an affordable, everyday carry weapon. But for me, at least for now, it's just another interesting Cold War era collectible that I'll probably keep as a range toy. Any weapon you carry is better than one you left at home. Thanks for watching. Hope you'll be back for my next tabletop review. Until next time, stay safe.